Daniel Radcliffe is James. Daniel is who's
Daniel
Harry
Radcliffe
Potter?
is Harry Potter. Chuck.
Who's Jim Radcliffe?
I know you love him to work some magic,
we need
but
magic.
he doesn't have that in.
Jon Jones said that if he is to go into the octagon against Tom Aspinall, he needs to get that FU money. And you know who's got the FU money, Jay? Turki Alalshikh. Turki Alalshikh said that.
Another week in December and still bringing you those sporting festivities. It is Two Up Front. My name is Jay, and as always, I'm with Chuck. Chuck, what up?
Oh, good, man. It's hot. What we've done to... Is climate change real? Is the ozone
This is not
layer...
the podcast for those questions.
Is the
You're not going to be finding those answers coming from me or yourself or in the comments. So, yes.
Hey, alcohol, let us know what's going on.
But yes, Chuck, it is, of course, another full sporting weekend that we come from. And right here, right now, as we are recording this, minutes before we started to record this, the result of the Proteas in that second test against Sri Lanka came through. The Proteas beat Sri Lanka in the second test by 109 runs to take the two-match test series 2-0. And now stand just one test win, Chuck, just one test win away from the World Test Championship. First of all, in that second test, what stood out for you, and how did we overall win this test series? And do you think anything can stop us from getting to the World Test Championship final now?
I think we got good momentum, so I don't think much can get in the way because we need just one more win. We can't throw it away. We need just one more win. But in terms of what stood out for me, I think it's the centuries scored by Verreynne and Rickleton. I think those are the guys whom we were looking for in terms of batting out in the future, because guys will age, guys will fall away from the squad as we develop into a new cycle. And I think these guys which we had, they batted quite well, because you look at Tristan Stubbs, right? He scored a century in the previous game. So you've got Stubbs, you've got Rickleton, you've got Verreynne already scoring hundreds in the same series. So I think that is important for us. The bowling, I think, was superb. I think you did mention that in order to win a test match, it's very important to collect 20 wickets, which we've done in both games. So I think that shows that we've got balance. The other thing about this particular match, Jay, is that they gave a bit more, the Sri Lankans. I mean, they were quite poor this morning. 5 wickets for 19 runs. They shouldn't have gotten up for bed. They should have just said, we know what's going to happen. Guys, let's not drive to the stadium. But all in all, I think that just shows the brilliance of our bowlers. Gerald Coetzee was absent due to injury. Dane Patterson comes in and acquits himself quite well. Kesh as well goes with the spin, and we get the wicket. So I think all in all, it was a team effort. Yeah, I think if you look everywhere, everyone contributed in some way or shape or form. I complained about Malcolm previously. He's got a half century in this game as well. So I think everyone is firing, everyone is contributing, everyone is giving us a start. Like Rabada with the early wickets, the partnership between Zozi and Malcolm crossed 50. Yes, we've seen other partnerships, right, between other batsmen go 100, 200 and stuff like that. But I think we did enough in terms of building a firm foundation for the middle order to perform. So I think all in all, Jay, I think everyone contributed, everyone gave something. And I think that's just how the test match was won, because when the bowlers were bowling well, the Kumars and the Fernandos from Sri Lanka, we had enough defense. Like if you look at the two different hundreds, right? Rickleton's 100 was more patient, whereas Verreynne was swashbuckling, right? So we played the game very well in its moments, and so I think we read the situation in each session quite well. So I think that's how we won that particular game.
Shukri Conrad, these are your flowers. I tip my cap off to the coach of the Proteas, Chuck. For me, what work he's been able to do with this team, right? Because everything that you mentioned, there's a next man up mentality in this team, and players who there were question marks around them in terms of what are their careers looking like at the Proteas, how are they going, what is this team that we have in 2024, what the present state of the Proteas across all formats really. But since we're talking about the test matches, within the test matches, and the players that Shukri has gone back to, that he has trusted, that he's selected, they've paid off. Right, you think about the test series against Bangladesh, you had Vian Mulder stepping up, and there were questions like, is Mulder one of those all-rounders that we can take into the future. We need someone who can give us something with the bat and the ball, and he put up his hand over there, right? He's injured for this test match, and we go to a Rickleton, and previously his highest score in test match cricket was 41, and he's back in the team and he's scoring a century. And then Chuck, it is the question around Tristan Stubbs, right? As the one that we really look to as the talent of the present and the future. Called him in our last recording the leader of the new generation, right? Can he be consistent? Can he find that consistency that justifies his talent, at the very top? And he's done that in the series. You mentioned in the first test against Sri Lanka, Coetzee, he gave us some wickets in that first test match as well. You had Marco Jansen go berserk with that 7 for that historic figures that he had in the first innings, and taking 11 in that test match. Coming into the second test match, normally you'd look to, well, he's the bowler in form. He should be the one who's carrying the attack still, and you still have a Kagiso Rabada in your ranks. As recently as last month was the number 1 test bowler in the world. He didn't quite carry that form into this test series, but as I'm saying, in the first test you had Jansen. In the second test, Jansen doesn't give you those numbers, but we don't need Jansen to give us those numbers. Also in the second test, you have Coetzee who's out with injury, and as I mentioned, Mulder is also out, right? But then you have Shukri, which is why I have to give him his flowers. Call on 35-year-old Dame Patterson. What's this guy gonna give us? At this point, at this stage of his career, in such a crucial moment where we know coming into the home test series against Sri Lanka, followed by Pakistan, we needed 3 wins to get to the World Test Championship. So it is crunch time, and you're gonna trust a guy who's been a journeyman in the context of his career with the Proteas. And Shukri's like, yeah, I'm gonna go and trust that guy. And what does Patterson do? He gives us a 5 in the first innings, and then he takes 2 crucial wickets in the second innings for Sri Lanka as well, to finish with 7 for the Test match. And then in that second innings, you have now a Keshav Maharaj, who is the best spin bowler South Africa have had, certainly since readmission. And he gives you a 5 to bring it over the line. And Chuck, the collective mentality of this team, which again I have to think reflects what they're getting from the coach. Coming into day 5 in the second test match, Sri Lanka were well poised. They had 2 set batsmen at the crease, and they needed about 120 runs to get to the total, and it was in the balance, and the pitch has been getting better to bat on the entire time. But then the Proteas come out, it's business-like. They skittle them out for 5 for 19 to wrap up the second test match and the series. And this is not even going into Themba Bavuma and his exploits, 4 scores of 50 plus in a row in this test series. When we needed the skipper to step up, he absolutely has put up his hand. We really would love for him to convert those 50s into 100s a lot more than he has. But when we have needed a performance, when we've needed an innings, we've needed a score, we've needed a partnership, he's been at the heart of that, right? And overall, this team, the manner in which they've come together, the manner in which the individuals have given performances, whether it's the guys we expect the performances from, or whether it's a guy who previously performed well but doesn't have quite that level of performance in the next test, his teammates are stepping up saying it's okay, it's good, I got you, I have this one. It's been brilliant to witness, man. And as I'm saying, I have to tip my hat off to Shukri Conrad, who is doing an absolute stellar job, and that's mostly seen in his selections.
So I think Kwena Mapak was also selected. It was a matter of, do I go with youth or do I go with experience, And I think he chose well in this particular series because he bore the results, getting the wickets. I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I'm really thinking about the right player here. Peter Siddle. He was the guy who came back into the Australian side quite late in his career again and still had stuff to show and stuff to prove. And I think that was a good addition to the side. Obviously, Patterson is not that player because he wasn't a mainstay in the Proteas side and then fell off and then came back again and looked rejuvenated. But late on in his career, still had stuff to contribute. So I think looking at the fact that we've got an up-and-coming prospect in Mapak, we've got someone who's a bit long in the tooth, which one do you go for? So I think flowers to Shukri for making the right decision. And I think, Jay, also when you talk about Bavuma and Stubbs, whenever the game almost swung in Sri Lanka's favor, that partnership always kept us in the game. And I think those kind of moments shape winning crucial moments in test matches is key. Just like how Sri Lanka, had they not lost a wicket late on in the game yesterday, I think they'd still be in the game. Because they lost their wicket late on, I think that's why they crumbled in the new day. So I think if you had two set batsmen facing the ball early on with the swing and with all the momentum that the Proteas have, I think then I think they've got more composure. But because it happened the way it did, South Africa won that one.
And that was a difference, right, between Sri Lanka and the Proteas, where the Proteas also experienced something similar when Verena, he got to his 100, it was 15 minutes until stumps, and then he lost his wicket. And then another wicket fell. And then South Africa were 7 down at the end of that day's play. And you would have thought to yourself, man, it would have been great if they go into the sheds without having lost those wickets. But South Africa have managed the close moments much better than Sri Lanka, where there was an opportunity for a collapse. There is someone coming in later down in the batting line, whether it's Verena or in the second innings, Bellingham, who didn't look all that comfortable in the first innings, he acquitted himself reasonably well, in order to get the score to where it eventually got to. So you are going to be tested. That's the nature of Test cricket. That's why it's called that, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, what do you look like in those moments where maybe you have to suffer a little, you have to struggle, and you have to search that inner strength. What do you have? The sun is baking. You've been out there for days, and you're toiling away, and either nothing is happening or everything is happening against you. Can you regain that momentum? And the Proteas have been able to do that, and this is why I'm confident. Therefore, as soon as Pakistan come, we're going to win the one test that we need, and we are going to be at Lords. And my goodness, it is my dream, it is my sporting dream to see Themba Bavuma lift that test championship mace above his head, because yeah, man, that's just going to be that's going to be next year, but already it will be my highlight of the year, regardless of whatever else happens in the world of sport, Chuck.
Lastly, just want to ask a question, right? Looking at the stroke play that Rabada was making, do you think at some point before he hangs up the boots, we get to see him score 100? Because he's capable. I think his batting has improved and he's got those shots in his locker. But do you think he'll ever give us a knock like that?
I'd love to have an interview with KG. And I was thinking the thing that you're asking, I was thinking that one of the things I really want to ask him is what's up with your batting, right? How seriously do you take your batting? Because he looks like a very skilled batsman. I just think that maybe he's not as interested in batting. He doesn't view himself as an all-rounder. He doesn't want to be someone who's got the burden of being the strike bowler, the main bowler, and then also, yeah, we can rely on you coming in later down the order to give us runs. He's very happy to go out there and to just free his arms. And that also suggests to me that his mentality is, yeah, no one is really counting on me to go in there and knuckle down and get a score, which I think if he put his mind to it, he's so talented that he'd be able to, but it seems to me he's not really interested in being an all-rounder. He's very much okay being as great as he is in his main discipline, that is bowling. But as I'm saying, I really would love to put this question to him, because this is, I think all-rounders are different breeds. I think you either see yourself as one or you don't. It's what happened with Stuart Broad. Stuart Broad was a genuine all-rounder at some point, and then he had a difficult spell. I forgot who he was facing, but that left a mark, and he never quite was the same guy with the bat anymore. And I think he was all too happy to not focus on that, but continue his good form and the numbers that he was producing on the bowling side. So yeah, it would be interesting to hear from Rabs what his view of himself as a player is. I think there's enough talent there, Chuck, where he can give us some good runs down the order. But if he doesn't, fortunately for him, he's that good with the ball that he's going to go and win you matches just with the ball.
One more win for the Proteas from the upcoming series, and then we get to play the final. But a team locally, if we switch sporting codes, that desperately needs a win is Kaizer Chiefs, because they'd lost to Polokwane City 2-0, and previously then they allowed Makisik to come back and draw the game. Jay, are there question marks, or should there be question marks about Nabi and his cooking? Do you think Kaizer Chiefs are progressing?
No, Chuck, there shouldn't be question marks because Polokwane City delivered a loss to Mamelodi Sundowns as well. And I just want to take up for all the Sundowns fans that we lost to the team that is ranked third, that is now in position number 3 in the PSL. So one of the top 3 teams in the PSL. But no, on a serious note, Chuck, where Kaizer Chiefs are concerned, it's fair to have questions around Nabi. I think it's ridiculous if you are on the extreme of Nabi out, know. But yeah, the coach was brought in. This is the coach that they initially wanted to bring in, but they couldn't come to an agreement with him because he wanted to bring his team. So they went with Athazwani and then subsequently with Mulifenteki. And we know after Johnson took over what happened with that, right? So they do then bring him in, and he is now in the building, and it's a good start. They start off with 2 wins in 2 matches in the PSL, and Kaizer Chiefs fans feel as though their lives are in danger, and they need protection wherever they go because, man, like, what are they going to do with all this winning? And true to form, to the Kaizer Chiefs that we've seen in the last number of seasons, it's gone down, right? And in the match against Polokwane City, which they lost 2-0. Nabi knew how Polokwane City were going to set up. They play that match with like 3 DMs, and they play in that low block, and they're going to want to play on the counter attack. But Nabi kept on sending his charges forward, Chuck. Like, he just kept on having them in numbers go forward, and they got caught out as you knew they would if you have watched Polokwane City before, and it's rather disappointing because, again, this is a team, Polokwane City, who how they're gonna play, how they're gonna set up, but then you play into their hands, and you are supposed to be the tactical mastermind that Kaizer Chiefs have brought in to turn around the turmoil that they've been in for a decade now. So for me, it's worrying that was the approach against Polokwane City. It's worrying that they've not managed to keep a clean sheet, like in the Premiership at all. And now they sit at the very bottom as the team that has conceded the most goals in the PSL. And Chuck, you can't just look at that and think to yourself that, it's okay, or not worry about it. That is worrying. Where there are 16 teams in the PSL, and you mean to tell me that of all those teams, and there are teams that are struggling now, teams that are in the relegation zone, but you keep getting caught out. And where the defense is concerned, I do have to put it on the coach because those are his players in the defense. The right back, that's maybe the question mark. And by the way, if Kaizer Chiefs are looking for a right back, Matuludi or at Polokwane City, the way he constructed that goal, I cannot believe a player that talented is playing as a right back. He's another Mutao kind of player because he's such a mercurial talent. But yes, so if they're looking for a right back, I think that is an option for them. But the rest of that back line, Miguel, whether it's Miguel in there, and it's Dotley and it's Cross and it's Ntwari, the keeper, those are players that joined with the coach, and you have to believe that he's the one who signed off on them coming to Kaizer Chiefs, and yet they are so porous, Chuck. And yes, of course, that does also go to the players in terms of how they're organizing themselves at the back, and maybe the onus does go on the players somewhat in terms of playing the situation of the game. Like with Cross, for example, they keep getting in behind him, and yet he keeps being caught high up the field. You think maybe he or someone else, whether it's Mount, the captain, or Miguel, who we imagine is the leader, the vocal leader of the defense, someone says to him, "Don't go, stay." Because we keep getting caught out the same way. But ultimately that comes back to the coach because he keeps giving that instruction even though it keeps backfiring against them. And I get it, where they are still lacking is those midfield options. He's turned to Ox now because he's desperate to find someone who's going to be able to break up play in the middle of the park. But in his previous stints at ASF Rabat as well as at Yanga, his DM was someone who could break up play and could also start play. He doesn't quite have that at Kaizer Chiefs. Mart has been played in that position, but he's not a DM. We saw against Sundowns, Castillo, who's out injured now, he played there, but he's also not a DM. Ox is the D in DM, but in terms of what he does with the ball at his feet, it's not very good, you know. So where I will give him a reprieve is they are still missing key personnel in the middle of the park, but that should not be to such an extent where we're talking about Chiefs as having the absolute worst defense in the league and how they just keep getting caught out.
Yeah, man, Mokumo Ox, I remember when the Chiefs fans were throwing missiles on the pitch and all that stuff, and he was there in his jeans, Makavela. And they're like, is this what has become Ox? And he's now the security at Chiefs, because he was overlooked in terms of like options in the midfield, but due to desperation, as you say, and injuries, he's come back into the side. Jay, for me, what's overly glaring is that you look at the experience, it can't help you out, and so he's turned to youth. Even they're struggling. You know, we were asking the question, are they being thrown in the deep end? And I think, yes, they are in terms of the style of play that Nabi wants to play. He wants to play a confident style of football where you hold on to possession, where you play on the front foot all the time. And I don't think these players are there confidence-wise to do it. Because I saw him do get on the ball a lot more times than he usually does, and he wastes those chances. Dua's not really as effective. And then with Marta again, that second goal is because of his misplaced pass. And you're like, guys, you can do better. The opening goal, fine, was brilliant from Ashwin Apollos, but Ntwara can do better at his near post. That's what you're supposed to do. Cover your near post. Anything after that or around that, that's on the defense. But as far as you're concerned as a keeper, cover your near post. So I think, Jay, when I look at that, I wonder about the balance of or the makeup of the team. Where do you go? What do you do? Because you've tried the youth. Serena's not as effective as you want him to be. And yes, I get he's not going to be the man of the match every game. There has to be other people to step up, other people to contribute. So I think they're in a fix in terms of the way they want to play their game. And I think he needs to pull in the reins a bit in terms of how they want to play, be more pragmatic, be more tactical in terms of your approach and play, because you can't be on the front foot all the time. Hence the number of goals conceded. You can't always bomb forward and think you're going to score at every given occasion. Yes, it's happened when you've played at Bloemfontein when they scored was it 3 against, is it who did they play in the Carling Cup first round?
They did score 4
in a
game against Supersport
with Vilagazi scoring. And when it does come together, it looks beautiful. But how often has it come together? And that's the question. How often has it come together? And if it doesn't, what's your plan B? Because as you're saying, Bradley Cross caught out of position, or Yusuf Mat is covering a lot of ground by himself. And I think this is where the issue is in terms of you can't give Ox the ball to build up play. You can't give it to Mart as well, because then he doesn't have the confidence to play the passes that he should. And so I think they should drop a bit deeper and try use the outlets. If Cross is going to go up anyway, let's use him as an outlet. Don't try to put the burden on Ox, because he can't do it. He's clearly not capable of doing that. As his previous coach said, Bakakuti, when we signed him, we want him to destroy, to break up play. This passing game, we know we can't do. It's not his strength. And so we never asked him to do that. And so when you start asking us to do those jobs, and Yusuf Mart is he's filling 2 positions. He's filling a DM job because Ox not quite doing that job as well. And he's trying to do the creative work as well. I think with a guy who's low on confidence, it's a bit of a burden. So I think he needs to figure out how do we manage the game well. Because if you look at the game against Israel AM, if you manage that, you come away with 3 points. The pressure subsides. You guys get to breathe. But on the back of that, you consider goal early. You have to chase the game the entire time. So I think game management is important, and that's on the coach. It's not only on the players, it's on the coach in terms of, okay, Cross, we see you're a good player, but let's play someone else. We see Wututu as a good player as well, but let's put someone else on the pitch. So I think managing that game, getting an early goal if you can. If not, save a point for yourselves. Don't always concede goals because you want to play this expressive front foot football. So I think the question marks need to be there, Jay, in terms of what is he giving us? What are we doing? Because as a Giant, Jay, you want to go forward. You can't stay in the same place. Hence, Man United are in the mud, because Ten Hag came and he left, and then they've got the new coach, and then now Dan Ashworth, which we're going to cover later on, has left as well. You're like, we're a big team. We're supposed to be going forward. We're supposed to be where we think we are. And so Kaizer Chiefs have stagnated. I don't think when you brought in Nabi, you thought you're going to concede the most goals. Or at least if you do, score more then you're like, okay, we're an open team, but we get the job done. So question marks have to arise because they aren't going anywhere at this point.
Yeah, and I think Chuck, he has to figure it out. And yes, that's a given, right? Because he's the coach. But the reason I say that is because the nature of Kaizer Chiefs and the lack of success in recent years and the response from the fans, right? I'll hop on about this until I'm in the grave. When Kaizer Chiefs dramatically lost that PSL title in the bubble, when Kambala did what he did, and Sundowns came to pip them in that title chase. The raw facts read that Kaizer Chiefs, after having finished in 9th position the previous season, finished in second, 2 points off of the title. But because of how that played out, where they were ahead by such a big margin, and then, yes, they pulled off a choke job and they were pipped, it left a visceral mark on the Chiefs fans to the point where they marched with a memorandum to the Chiefs management to say, no, get rid of Middendorp, And for me, that wasn't supposed to happen. But the thing is, this is the nature of the fan base of Kaizer Chiefs, that they are on the precipice. They do not have the room. They've not given themselves the room to tolerate anything that might look like same old. And currently, we mentioned Kaizer Chiefs have allowed the most goals conceded in the PSL thus far this season, and they find themselves in 9th position. If this was where they ended at the end of the season, you best believe that those calls of Nabi out will be much louder. And for me, the reason I say that Coach Nabi has to figure it out is because I don't know, Chuck, where Kaizer Chiefs would go from here. Because as I mentioned, this was the coach that they had hunted, and he drove a hard bargain. And they were like, no, we're not going to go with you. And then they paid the price, so we thought, for not going with him, right? And then they came back to themselves and said, well, you know what? We are in a dire and desperate situation. We need to go get Nabi. And they got Nabi, and they got his people. They've gone and gotten his translator / assistant coach. They have catered to his every need. And the onus is on that coach now, because you said, I'm not coming unless certain boxes are ticked, and Kaizer Chiefs have gone and catered to your whims, right? Now you need to repay the faith that they've shown in you, and you also need to repay the excitement, if you want to call it that the Kaizer Chiefs fans had. Because if it doesn't work out, Chuck, if they end up at the end of the season where they are now, those fans are going to call for the removal of the coach. And I would advise the Kaizer Chiefs management, as I did back then, that there are some occasions where most of the time you should listen to the fans, because we play for the fans. But there are some occasions where you need to put your foot down. You need to recognize that you are the exco and you are the ones who make the football decisions, and stick with the decision that you made. But it is the biggest fan base in the country, and when they do get into in unison and they call for something with a collective voice, it is hard to ignore. So Coach Nabi has to turn this around for the sake of those Kaizer Chiefs fans, not even for his sake, because as I'm saying, in light of Amakosi, if it doesn't work out with Coach Nabi, I don't know, where do you go? Do you go get Hugo Pros? Like, what do you do? Do you try Leo Orlando back to South Africa? Do you go with Pizzo? I don't think that's ever going to happen with Pizzo, because those personalities just don't gel, So he has to figure it out. And as you mentioned, to begin with, in terms of your approach, man, be a little more pragmatic. For example, mentioning Cross, how he's always caught up high up the field. Sereno is not just a 10. He's a winger. And if you play him as the winger, you then have that width on that side. And then you can drop Cross a little more. But from the start of the game until the end of the game, or until Sereno is subbed, he's playing through the middle. And you played narrowly against the Polokwane City team, which, again, as I point out, they had 3 DMs, and they were narrow, and they were controlling the middle of the field. And you did not adjust to that whatsoever by introducing width, and also like stretching out some of the players that you had centrally and moving them out wide and moving that defense around. So, and we're not sitting here like pretending as if we know more football than Coach Nabi, right? But you are the tactician. How is it that you did not adjust to what Polokwane City not only did in that game, but they've been doing this entire season? How have you not adjusted in terms of how you've been exploited defensively for all these teams to score all these goals against you? You have to be better. As the coach, you have to be better.
I mean, if you look at all the good managers, like Pep Guardiola plays beautiful football, but he had to get himself a Ruben Diaz, a Laporte. He had to get a Stones, because you have to show up at the back. If you don't concede goals, chances are then you're winning games, or at least you're escaping with the point. That much is guaranteed. So I think he has to fix that. Ndaba Rulani though, Jay, with the Club World Cup draw having been revealed, he's gonna get to play Pep. If he coaches his Chiefs, those chances are not there, Jay. So I don't think they can lure him. So now he's in a prime position to play Pep if he's still at the job, because we know they're ruthless up there in the north. Because that thing is in June. Why they give us the draw now? Ngati World Cup. Well, yeah, it is a Club World Cup, but come on, give us the draw.
This is when the draw for the World Cup happens. Usually, it happens in December.
Yeah.
And the World Cup. FIFA really are treating it like the World Cup of clubs. But yeah, I really hope that's an aside that you went to. I really hope like Wydad do not fire that man. Like, please let him live out his dream.
Please.
Doesn't matter what happens in the season. Please let Rulani live out his dream and meet Pep Guardiola and tell him how much he loves him and has inspired him. But yeah, Chuck, we'll see if Nasreddine Nabi is able to figure out the Chiefs' conundrum, or whether or not he'll be someone who is on the hot seat. But in England, things are heating up, or maybe they're not, because the fan base would have you believe otherwise. The Chelsea fan base, by far, and the Pirates, like just fan bases talking about, we just want to stay humble. We are not in this, we are not in that. That's what we're doing. But then you look at the raw numbers and performances, you're like, what are we talking about here, Chuck? Over the weekend in the Premier League, Liverpool, of course, were supposed to come up against Everton in the Merseyside derby, but that was called off because of weather. And then you had Arsenal, who had the first opportunity to cut the lead to Liverpool to 4 points, but they could not manage that, a 1-1 draw against Fulham. And the struggles of Manchester City continue. You thought maybe there was a revival, the 3-0 win, but they were held to a 2-2 draw against Crystal Palace. The one team that seemingly took advantage of the absence of Liverpool from the schedule this past weekend and put some pressure on them. Chelsea, right? Chelsea went to the Tottenham Stadium, and as they have done the entirety of the history of the Premier League, battered Spurs. Tottenham took a 2-0 win thanks to some slippy C performances there from Cucurella, but then allowed Chelsea to come back in that game, and Chelsea eventually won that match 4-2. Chuck, are the Blues of West London genuine title contenders?
If you look at the fixtures on the weekend, they had the harder mission. You could argue, obviously, that maybe there's Palace, Fulham. Maybe Fulham is a tougher to ask than Spurs, because Spurs are everywhere.
Yes, they are, Chuck. I can confirm that Fulham are a tougher opponent to play in their own backyard than Tottenham Hotspurs.
So due to Cucurella not having the best footwear on the pitch, he slips. Goal number 1 goes in, slips again, contributes to goal number 2. But Sancho pulled the goal back, and then I think Spurs floundered a bit, and Chelsea started to believe. And I think with the balance of play, Chelsea were the better team. And I don't know how this happens all the time, because Frank Lampard was always speaking in terms of whenever we went to White Hart Lane, we knew we were coming back with the points.
It's only Spurs, lads, famously.
and that idea has continued regardless of who's at the helm, which players either team has. That always seems to happen. And I think Spurs performed poorly in this particular game, man. And yes, Chelsea have got the talent, and I think they were the better side. The fact that they came back from 2 goals down to win eventually 4-3 because they allowed another goal in. The curious thing about Chelsea, Jay, is this, and I think maybe they should stay humble, the Chelsea fans. Chelsea are always conceding goals. They'll win, but they're always conceding goals. In a game where you usurped the dominance or the balance of play, and you became the team in the pound seat, you don't concede again in the end and give them a bit of hope. But all in all, Jay, I think what the manager did right was tactically, and also he's got the personnel. When you've got Kaizer, when you've got Lucas Lavia, when you've got Enzo, chances are you win a lot of those midfield battles, because Spurs don't have much to compete with. So I think Chelsea are looking good, man. When you've got Cole Palmer and he's always directly involved in something, if it's not a penalty, he's creating something, and it seems like the cast around him are starting to perform, except for Nicholas Jackson, when you finally put him into your FPL team and then he doesn't give you anything. But I think all in all, I think it was a composed performance from them. They didn't panic. They went 2 goals behind, didn't panic. They played their football, because eventually, if you keep giving them the ball, some magic will come from them. If not Palmer, Sancho, like we saw in this game. If not him, Neto tried as well. So I think, Jay, they're there, man. They're there. They can't be ignored. The fans need to start saying that they are title contenders. Yes, they don't want to put the pressure on themselves, but they genuinely are at this point.
That's the trick, Chuck. You mentioned Jackson, and it hasn't worked out recently. But also, like in that match against Spurs, like absolutely no one in the world And here comes Nicholas Jackson with a back heel. Jackson loves his back heels, eh? And he kept on giving them in the box, and it actually led to some chances. But if it's not Jackson, it's Palmer, right? And if not Palmer, you did mention Pedro Neto. Now you have an Enzo who was languishing on the bench, and he's come into the team now, and he's scoring goals, and he's assisting goals, and he seems to have hit his best form at Chelsea. And this is what Chelsea have for me, and this is why I envy them as a fan of Arsenal. They've got game breakers, Chuck. You mentioned the fact that they score 4, right, to win the game, but they concede 3 goals. So that does make you wonder, like, is that really a genuine title contender when you can't be playing that level of exciting games week in, week out and try to win the title, because eventually you're going to get got, But the thing is with Chelsea, and they are still very raw and they're still developing under Maresca, but what they do have is they have talent, and this is the model that Real Madrid have used over the entire time we've watched Real Madrid in terms of how they build squads. You don't think of Real Madrid famously as, this is the style of play. This is the Real Madrid way, in terms of the same way you think of Barcelona and tiki-taka, whatever the case may be. But what they tend to have is talent that supersedes the talent on the other team, and usually it wins out. And at Chelsea, as I'm saying, they have game breakers throughout that field, because you do think about a Palmer. Like Palmer, he can be absent during the game for large periods of the game, but then when he's in and around the edge of the box, you better watch out, because what's bound to happen is there's going to be a goal, or someone's going to trip and fall, and there's going to be a penalty, and there's going to be a goal anyway, because it's automatic from the 12-yard spot, And if he's not doing that, he's providing goals for Jackson. Jackson is not, he didn't play in the previous game, and he didn't score against Spurs. But then now, as I'm saying, you've got Enzo, and Enzo is a hugely talented player. That's why he was bought for the money he was bought from Benfica. And then you have a Pedro Neto. He can play on the right. He can play on the left. Wherever you need him to deputize on the wing, he can be there, and he's equally adept with both feet and playing on both sides. And now you have Jadon Sancho. When Sancho was signed by Chelsea from Manchester United, yes, he had a good season at Dortmund last season. Not a great final in the Champions League, and you wondered that maybe Sancho is not quite that guy, And even at Chelsea, he's had some good performances, but he hasn't locked down a starting position. But then he shows up and he does what he does, and he reminds you of the talent of Jadon Sancho. And the reason Chelsea signed Jadon Sancho was not because they thought to themselves, I don't believe, at least, maybe Maresca comes out and he says differently, that this is the perfect guy for the system that we want to play. I think in my head it was, there's another hugely talented guy. Let's bring him in. It's high upside, and it's a very high floor, right? That if it doesn't work out, it's already what we've seen at Manchester United, and then he can go back. Or even if you sign him, it's exactly what Liverpool tried to do with Chiesa, right? Where you sign him for not much of a fee, and if it works out, my goodness, what a coup. If it doesn't, well, we didn't really have our eggs in his basket, and it seems to be going in the right direction with Sancho. So, having said all of that, Chuck, I do think they're title contenders. In another season, I think, let me qualify this, right? I think what registers as a title contender is the context of the season that they are contending. I think if this was one of those seasons where it looks very obvious that Manchester City and Liverpool are going to score 90, 95, close to 100 points, then I'd say no.
Yeah.
But in this season, we've seen, yes, Liverpool get off to a great start and pull out a gap. And call me a hater, but I'm still not yet convinced that is in the bag. I say that as a fan of Arsenal who wants to see them bottle, right? But if I'm actually looking at Liverpool, Chuck, I honestly do think they are a Mo Salah slump in form or injury, knock wood, away from coming back to the rest of the pack. And as a result, I don't think that the gap between them and the rest of the field is that large. And where Chelsea find themselves in the group with Arsenal and Arsenal, who are reliant on set pieces to score their goals and who lack that firepower that Chelsea have, and then a Manchester City who are having their worst season under Pep Guardiola, certainly their worst start under Pep Guardiola. You have to look at Chelsea now, 4 points off the top of the log. Yes, with Liverpool having a game in hand, but this is Chelsea having played all of quote unquote the big teams or the title challenges with a more agreeable schedule ahead of them. That they are title contenders, especially because Maresca in this period, which we know is a vital one towards shaping the rest of the season, he is rotating his players. He's been doing that in that third tier European tournament, the Conference League. I don't even know it because my teams don't play in that competition, and now he's brought it into the Premier League. In the last game, they went away and they scored 5 goals with a much changed team, and now went 2-0 down against Spurs and came back, scored 4 goals with what you would consider the first team. And there are still players that he's still reintroducing into the team. We might see Mudryk come good. We might see Nkunku, who when he plays, he seems to be scoring now, come good as well. So he's creating that competition, he's creating that depth. They have the results, the confidence is growing. And when you look at the competition, you can't say, oh man, this is like the greatest and the deepest field ever assembled in a title chase. So they're in a title chase.
You know what they've done, Jay? They've made us forget that at some point we saw them as London Cowboys. Because we were seeing Todd Bowley spend £1 billion, and we're like, what's going on with this team? They've got all the talent in the world, this and that, and now that's far removed from where they are now. Right now, they are properly Chelsea, almost vintage Chelsea, in terms of they've got quality.
No, Chuck. They are vintage Chelsea when they stop conceding goals.
Okay, actually, with the John Terrys and yes. Okay, that's probably true. But in terms of actually being there, mixing themselves in and around with the big boys, because as you said, Jane, in terms of what they have is something that Arsenal don't have. And Arsenal, fine, for what they don't have, they've got set pieces, right? Because yet again, they scored from a set piece, and the one goal that they scored in open play was disallowed for offside. And I guess that's what they negate when they have set pieces, right? But what they have, Jay, is that when you look at their makeup now, Kaizer had to play right back because all 3 of the midfielders are playing so well, so you had to fit all 3 of them in there. When you look at someone like Hulabi, who didn't finish the game, he was a menace to deal with in the center of the pitch because he was everywhere. And you're like, okay, you got Lavia, you've got Fernandes, you've got Caicedo, and there's like all those other talent behind them and in front of them. Okay, not behind them because they concede goals a lot. So I think they finally come good basically in terms of all the talent that they've bought, all the players who've been registered under Chelsea. I don't know what's the number at this point, 60. Remember they had like 2 changing rooms and some people had to change in the youth locker room. Like we've forgotten all about that because now the football is doing the talking. Now the goals are coming in. Now they've got star players and you're like, okay, let's sit up and take notice. So I think America's doing a good job. I think their management of that said talent as well is good. I think it's been a blessing in disguise to have the Conference League, because the players are playing there without any pressure. It's like another Carabao Cup. Go in there, get game time, play, get used to the system, and after a while you'll come back. I don't know if this helps Chilwell at some point. Maybe Chilwell will come back later in the season if there are enough injuries. I don't know.
Because those when players stay fresh.
Yeah.
Because they're not playing in Europa or the Champions League midweek and they have to come back and on the weekends to play games. That's what happened with Arsenal 2 seasons ago, right? When they launched their first title challenge. That they were not in the Champions League. They had Europa, but the early parts of Europa, you played a much changed team, so they were fresh going to those games in the Premier League, and that's what we're seeing with Chelsea.
Yeah, and the benefit of that, like for instance, I know Maresca had a preseason, unlike Ruben Amorim. Amorim was saying the games come so quickly that you can't have too many training sessions in between to implement your ideas. But if you've got a second team playing somewhere in Russia, you guys can train the first team. And you can implement your ideas and you can get solid ideas in terms of how you guys are adapting to those said tactics. So I think that tournament is helping them a bit. But all in all, I think it's a good job in terms of the personnel and the tactics. Obviously, they should concede less goals, but so far so good. And I think they're genuine contenders.
Yeah, it's just the defense that Maresca has to sort out. I don't think he'll be able to sort it out this season unless they bring in, I don't know who's out there that you can get like in January, a la Van Dijk. There doesn't seem to be that dominant centre back out there. But yeah, he'll work with what he has. They have to change the keeper at some point. I think at the end of the season, Sanchez cannot be the guy if they intend on challenging consistently going forward. But right here, right now, when you look at the lay of the land, yeah, Chelsea definitely in it to win it. We'll see how it shakes up at the end of the Christmas period. Chuck,
Yes, sir.
a team that is definitely not in it to win it is Manchester United. Oh man, you've got Dean Ashworth, who was acquired from Newcastle and had threatened to take Newcastle to arbitration, to take the legal route to get out of Newcastle. And then while he was on extended gardening leave, eventually the negotiations came together and Manchester United were able to poach Dean Ashworth to be their director of football at Manchester United. But now, just 5 months into his stint, he's gone. What the hell is going on at Manchester United?
No one knows.
Now,
man.
what's
No
going on
one
now at
knows.
Manchester United?
Oh my man, that place is cursed. Because for me, as a director of football, what can you do in 5 months? You found it a mess. What can you do in 5 months? It's not like Maresca, where he's got all the players. They spent $1 billion for him, and yes, he has to be a good coach to manage at Chelsea. But even Pochettino was getting it right because they gave him enough resources. But you come in there and you find it a mess. And I mean, okay, fine, fair play. The Ten Hag experiment, if I could call it that at that point, because he wasn't the guy, but he won us the FA Cup, so let's keep him on and let's give him money to sign players. That didn't go well, right? But as far as I understand it, it wasn't just a Dean Ashworth decision to keep Ten Hag. It was him and other people involved. So then say, okay, we fired Ten Hag and now we're starting off with Ruben Amorim, and now we have to find a different style of play, and we're starting things from scratch again. I think it's not fair to fire a person after 5 months, number one. Number two, as ambitious as Daniel Radcliffe is. James? Daniel? Who's
Daniel
Harry
Radcliffe
Potter?
is Harry Potter, Chuck.
Who's Jim Radcliffe?
I know you love him to work some magic,
we need
but
magic.
he doesn't have that in his back pocket.
Imagine we had that disarming spell
So
against
Jim
every.
Radcliffe.
Thank you, against every game, especially for set pieces, because we look horrendous. But I think, as ambitious as you are, you have to be patient. It's the same thing that we spoke about just earlier about Kaizer Chiefs, which as much as you've got ambition, as much as you've got the talent, if you spent money, yes, you have put in your own money, you have to be patient. Things take time, especially with Man United, because I think if you've got a mini vehicle, you can do a U-turn as quickly as you want. But if you've got a big max truck, 18-wheeler, it's not going to be so quick. And you have to be patient in terms of how you're going to turn things around at a big club like Man United. So I think, yes, they did make mistakes in terms of keeping Ten Hag on as long as they did. Because after having won the FA Cup, the results were still there in terms of what he did in the league. The biggest or the best mark in terms of aggregating how good your team is, how good your management is. Over 38 games, your team is still open. You're still conceding goals. As much as we did win the FA Cup, we played Sheffield in the semi-final. 3 goals up. And we almost lost that. That should say to you that they won it, but they're looking shaky. And so, yes, they made a mistake and they kept him on for longer than he should. They gave him money to sign players. We've benefited from getting De Ligt. I think we've benefited from getting Mazraoui. Xerxes, I'm not too sure, right? But apart from that, I think Ruben Amorim has to have, even if we didn't sign players, Ruben Amorim comes in, he has a different style of play altogether. So he's probably going to make his own wholesale changes and sign his own players anyway, even if you got him in at the beginning of the season. So I think, I don't know what's going on at Man United. I don't think this is the right thing to do because we hunted Perada, we got Ashwood, we got someone else. We went to Bournemouth, to Brighton to get Brighton, Newcastle, and Man City to get the back staff right. And if he was headhunted and he was so prized and he was such a good person, if we fire him, who else is going to be better than Dan Ashworth? Who else are we going to find to replace him? So I don't know, man. We're very ambitious, but I don't think we have much direction.
So. Jim Radcliffe raised ticket prices at Manchester United because he needs to raise money for the project, right?
I must add that.
Yes. And so you think to yourself, okay, this man is frugal and he's trying to bring in as much money for the project as possible. But then when you look at his other moves, Dean Ashworth, as I mentioned, he was stuck at Newcastle, and eventually, when they settled out of court, Manchester United paid £3 million to get Dean Ashworth. And then you kept on Erik ten Hag, and you gave him an extension, in fact. And when you had to part ways with him, because you always were gonna part ways with Erik ten Hag, regardless of the fact that he won that single match at the end of the season against Manchester City, you had to pay him. And then, in order to go get Ruben Amorim, you had to pay Sporting to get him out of his contract and to bring him at Manchester United. And the fans are the ones who are paying for your knucklehead moves. So Ratcliffe came in like the Messiah. He came in like the savior, and now he's kind of looking fraudulent. He's kind of looking like, what was that for? Because he was on the record, Chuck, saying how much he wants Ashworth. Like, he pushed to get Ashworth, and then now 5 months down the line, he's gone. What is that about? So some reports suggested that Ashworth, he wanted out because with regards to hiring Amarim and other decisions that are being taken at Manchester United, Ashworth was frozen out, and so Ashworth did not feel as though he's part of the project or as he should be, and therefore Ashworth decided that this was not the place for him to be. I don't know for a fact if that's what was happening, but if that was happening, then there was communication from the team that we don't really value you in your position, and that's why they parted ways. But, Chuck, I have to play devil's advocate, right? If indeed it was, say, the sole decision of Ashworth to keep Erik ten Hag, that's a fireable offense. Right there by itself, that is a fireable offense. And then if he is the one who is saying we need to give him a contract, and then the inevitable happens, and now you have to part ways with him and have to pay Erik ten Hag, that is a fireable offense, Chuck.
If you think about it though, Jay, okay, fine, in the league, we're not going to compete. Even if we were as bad as we were, we're not going to compete because the bar was set very high. You have to get 90 plus, and that's where Arsenal only City can get to. Ten Hag has delivered a trophy in each season, and if you bank on that, what if he brings a Europa? Was that still a bad season? Like, do we not want to continue trajectory of winning stuff?
Wait, am I hearing you saying that Manchester United should have kept Erik ten Hag?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if it's a fireable offense, I'm just saying, do you not see a bit of logic in his thinking?
Well,
is the question.
Well,
can you not play devil
that is what he argued for, right, Chuck? So if that is what he argued for, that what you are saying, there's logic. This man has won us trophies. This man has delivered the FA Cup against our biggest rivals who have just been running riots in this country. So let us keep him on. He might bring us a Europa. If that was his argument, and then the season starts and it goes the way that it does, and Chuck, because we cannot revisit history, like what happened, right? The facts are Erik ten Hag then had the start to the season that he had, and as overwhelmingly the Manchester United fans were down with Erik ten Hag. Like, thank you for the trophies, but we don't want you in our club anymore. Yeah. And if Ashworth is the one who pushed for that, and it went the way that it did, because sometimes, Chuck, you might see someone in our country, South Africa, we have a term that we call mooi van ver, which means like you look beautiful from afar off, but then when someone comes a little closer, you're like, you look a little funny under the light, you know. Just because you hollered at someone from across the street, and because maybe you've got cataracts in your eyes and you don't see properly, and now that they're up close, you see them exactly how they are, or you get to discover the personality, you have every right to say, nah, you know what, I'm not about this. Were they minding their business, going about their lives when you hollered at them? Yes, they were, right? And did you disturb them? Yes, you did. But now, Chuck, that they are here, you don't just go ahead and, let's continue with the ideas that I had just because like I thought what I thought when you were far. Chuck,
I think, right?
When let me just finish off this point, right? It was a mistake to extend Erik ten Hag because United literally paid for it dearly. And if Sir Jim is now and the other decision makers at Manchester United were thinking to themselves, this is a decision we're supposed to make, firing Erik ten Hag or parting ways with him at the end of the season, but we didn't, and this is what happened. We are not going to do this again where we are not convinced by someone's performance, but then we decide to give them a little more time because there is no time at Manchester United. So if in the 5 months they've seen everything they need to see with him doing his job up close and they've decided this is not the guy, they had to fire him.
Look, Jay, I think if I were to play, what's a double devil's advocate? Because you already played devil's advocate,
I don't know.
so we
You
can't
are
be
the
the
Red
same
Devils fan,
side.
so you know how like it works in that realm.
Anyway, the fact that when Erik ten Hag had, I think while he was en route to play in the FA Cup final, other alternatives were being interviewed. They were looking for someone else, and it seems to me, or it sounds like they couldn't find better alternatives than Ten Hag at present. And then he goes ahead and wins the FA Cup. We're like, well, because we couldn't find a chief candidate to back, and this guy just won the FA Cup, let's stick with him. So for me, at least there was an attempt, right? And if I don't know if Dean Ashworth is solely responsible for the hiring and firing of guys, because that's a big move. I think they run it past Radcliffe, and obviously you'll lean on their experience and their knowledge, but I don't think it was completely foolish in terms of, oh, he wants the FA Cup, let's keep him. They did interview other guys, and I think Ruben Amorim was interviewed as part of the candidates, and they then said, Ruben, we need you now and never, because things are a mess now, and they've gotten the guy. If you think about it, Jay, in 5 months, really, when Rashford and Casemiro went to the States to watch NBA, right? Gary never had an issue with that in terms of the team are in 13th place and you guys are going to watch NBA. Fine, you're not playing for international sides, but you guys should be home training and trying to better yourselves. It's not the right thing to do, right? And so when you asked Ruben Amorim that question, Ruben Amorim said, Uguti, if it was up to me, I wouldn't have given them that time. But it's the culture. They know that according to the club rules, they haven't broken any laws. I wouldn't have done that, so the culture allowed them to. So in the future, I would like things to change. So I think Dean Ashworth walked into a situation that is already broken. And of the things that he was able to fix, maybe Ten Hag was a big fixture in terms of get rid of that, get something different. But in terms of overall, the club was in a mess. The stadium was in a mess. So in terms of what he can and what he could not control, I don't think he would have done all of that thing and turned it around and fixed it in 5 months. You are going to get things wrong in 5 months. I think you want to get things right as well in that 5 months. I know it's a big thing, Ten Hag hiring and firing, but I think Jay couldn't have done everything by himself. There were things that were wrong, and so I think it's a mess to have fired him again. I think keep him. He's made a mistake. Keep him, because you chased after him. He will make him. I don't like Nabi, Jay. Like we're saying with Nabi, you chased him for so long, and okay, at this point, it's not where you're not where you want to be. But keep him because he's the best in class. So I think firing him is a mistake.
I don't know the performance of Dean Ashworth except for the fact that he kept on Ten Hag and it happened what it happened. If his boss is of the opinion that, yeah, in the 5 months, this is not what, there's buyer's remorse. And the thing with Manchester United, it is a dumpster fire over there. So these are the things that happen, right? And I do think, Chuck, perhaps Radcliffe was thinking heads must roll. He doesn't have anybody above him. If he had somebody above him, maybe he was the one who was going to get the boot, right? But since you cannot fire yourself, you do the next best thing. You go after the guy that you hired, because the buck does end with you. Across the board, I don't think that management at Manchester United is doing a stellar job since Sir Jim came in. Like, I don't think we can look at the state of Manchester United and really think to ourselves, yeah, man, it's great. Oh, I see the improvements. There haven't been. He made hires, and he's fired one of his hires already. So we'll see who they get in, and we'll also get to hear from Dean Ashworth. In terms of hopefully we get to hear from him what happened, or we get to hear from Manchester United in terms of why it didn't work out. But if you as the boss have a sense that this thing is not working and I'm not willing to give it more time because I've seen enough, you pull the plug. Jay,
for me, I'm defending Dan Ashworth again. Manchester United, up until that point, had never had a director of football. This guy is the first iteration of that in the club's history. When other teams were doing that, they were like, we'll find with our current structure. And now that they're in the mud, they're like, okay, let's get Kiki Pereira. Let's get Dan Ashworth, because now they're behind. He's the first guy to do that, number one. The stadium has been refurbished inside the tunnel and whatnot. They're building a new training ground. So he's getting things running. So what would you expect him to be?
I don't think that was part of his job, Chuck.
I don't know, Chip, but I'm just saying there are things that are being changed. There are things that are happening at Man United, and you're thinking, this guy must be perfect. He's the first time. Which other model is he going to follow? Can you say, do it like such and such? Do it like such and such? No, it's the first time. And as Mourinho would tell you, and other managers who come before you, it's a hard job being there at Man United. I don't think it's just for the manager, but I think for the guys who are higher up as well.
Hey, ain't no excuse about it being hard. You took on the job. You huffed and you puffed to get out of Newcastle to go to Manchester United. And if at Manchester United you didn't do the job you're hired to do, I can see why you're out in the cold. But you make a fair point in terms of, and the point here, Chuck, is that Manchester United have been badly run for a long time. And maybe this is still a function of that continuing even under the dispensation of Radcliffe. We'll see who he gets in. And again, we'll hopefully get to hear from both sides in terms of what happened, and we'll be back here to revisit how that all transpired.
All right, Jay, if we go to UFC, right, we saw Jamahal Hill approach Alex Pereira at the UFC PI in Vegas. And he was about to... I don't even know why he went to confront to Pereira, because actually when I think about it, he came to Pereira while he was training and he wanted some of that fire, right? Some of that smoke. But when Pereira threw gloves at him in terms of, okay, come, let's do it. He was like, no, I get paid to do this. Like, so why did you go there in the first place? But Jay, is this more sour grapes? Because we saw what happened when they actually were in the octagon together. He got his lights put out, right? So if you're Jamahal Hill, what are you doing there? What's your business there?
Jamahal Hill says he didn't go up there to start smoke. He went up. He saw him and he went up to him. And then he says that Alex Pereira started saying something to his coach, and his coach started interpreting in terms of oh man. Jamahal Hill was talking about. Then the conversation goes to Jamahal Hill saying that Pereira mentioned how, oh, it's nice to see that you're awake. Something to the end that it's nice to see that you're awake, because of course Pereira had put him to sleep. So that got Jamahal Hill riled up, and now Jamahal Hill is talking about how he's gonna put Pereira to sleep. And with Pereira, as we saw, throwing the gloves at Jamahal Hill, saying, we can go now. Jamahal Hill says, well, I only put on gloves to get into the octagon, but like, this is not what's happening right here. We don't need gloves. But then Jamahal Hill switches up and he says, well, he's not going to be fighting unless like there's money on the table, because they made good money at UFC 300 with that fight. And like, he wants to take care of business at UFC 310 coming up in January against Jury, and then get another shot at Alex Pereira and not fight for free, pretty much. But man, like, that sounds like a whole lot of smoke from up his you-know-what from Jamahal Hill. Because number one, Chuck, when I was looking at that video, I thought to myself, I would not want smoke with Alex Pereira right now as well. This is not me questioning the heart of Jamahal Hill. Anyone who steps into the octagon is about that life, right? But Chuck, I look at the state of the two men in that video. One, Alex Pereira is shirtless, and he looks like he has been like chiseled out of stone, right? That boy looks like he's ready to go tomorrow, right now, in fact, which is why I was like, put on the gloves, let's do it. Jamahal Hill, he looked a little rotund now. That looked like a man who hasn't been training maybe for a little while, and he knows his fight is not coming up tomorrow, but it's coming up in a little over a month. So he's got some time to get in shape. And I believe he took one look at him and thought about his level, because they were training in the same facility, and he could see the workout out of the corner of his eye, and he knows his levels. And he thought to himself, nah, not right now. Not right now. Like, I don't need that. So for me, I don't know why Jamahal Hill stepped up to that, man. If you're going to get gloves thrown at you, you're going to be like, nah, let's not do that. And then he's walking away and he's talking smack, talking about how they're going to meet again in the ring and he's going to put him to sleep. I'm like, brother, having been put to sleep yourself, I don't know if you want to be saying these things to Alex Pereira.
You know, the thing about Alex Pereira, I think, Anthony Smith, Jamahal Hill, I think it's a bit of jealousy in terms of this guy came up too quickly. This guy is in it too quickly because these guys have been there grinding, but they didn't have the same success as he has. I see this because Anthony Smith, who is struggling, I think is on the verge of retirement, has come out to say, well, actually, Pereira's striking is good, but I'm more well-rounded. So if we were to ever fight, I'd beat him. And people were like, the fans were like, really? You? Of all people? And Jamahal Hill stepped into the ring with Alex Pereira. He got his lights turned off. And he's the same guy again saying he's going to beat him. You had your chance. You blew it, you know? And I think Jamahal Hill has had success, right? I think he earned the right to fight for the title. He earned the right to get the contender spot, and he got the belt, right? And unfortunately, he got his knee injured. They had to vacate. I don't see him climbing back up the mountain. And all he can do now is talk. And all these guys do when they have their YouTube channels turned on, we've got their social media, they say, if we meet in person, it's going to be on. But when the guy throws gloves at you and says, let's do it, why don't you take that chance?
And that was what precipitated this confrontation, right?
Yeah.
Because Jamahal was like, well, we don't have to be talking on Twitter anymore. I'm here.
Okay.
And then and what transpired. In his defense, Jamahal Hill's defense, and when going, because I was thinking to myself, why would you say, just talk all that smack to somebody who like beat you in the first round the way that he did? But and this is something that is backed up by Joe Rogan as well, that it was circumstantial. how that knockout happened in the first round, because Jamahal Hill kicks him in the groin.
I don't believe that. You know what? Look.
Chuck,
Look,
the setup is that the ref comes in, and of course Jamahal Hill drops his guard, right? In terms of, okay, are we fighting? What's happening? And at that point, Pereira had closed the distance, and he shoves the ref away, and then boom, like it's a knockout. So Jamahal Hill's whole stance is that, well, without that, it might have been a different fight altogether, and we need another fight, and he's certainly trying to set up another fight.
Hey, when Cap says to Iron Man, put on the suit, let's go.
That's exactly what I was thinking about, Chuck.
It's like, I see it, and Jay, I don't buy that excuse, and I know I understand the explanation from Joe Rogan, but when he kicks Pereira in the groin, and Herb Jean tries to step in and say, okay, do you need time? Pereira pushes more in terms of, I'm good. Jamahal Hill can see all of this. He's not distracted. He's looking at his opponent and says, I'm good. And he takes a step back as Pereira is approaching him. So for me, he's definitely aware of what's going on. If you want to reset, run away to the left, run away to the right, and then reset yourself. But if you're going to stand in front of him still and want to trade, if your lights get put out, that's on you.
Hey, man, that's what he said. That's what he said. But in terms of Alex Pereira, Chuck, I think he must be the biggest star in UFC, right? Because when I think about the fact that Jamahal Hill wants a crack at him, Jiri also wants a crack at him again, depending on how that fight against Jamahal Hill happens. Famously, we've heard and we've spoken about how Jon Jones is on the record as saying that the fight that's out there that he wants, willing to either go down to light heavyweights again or figure out a catchweight, is he wants to fight Alex Pereira. And Pereira now two-time two-division champion, and having come in with the storied background with Adesanya, and I'd be jealous too, because like it really, the way that he's been positioned, and this guy doesn't even speak English. He barely speaks.
Shama.
Like, we don't get to hear what he has to say. He doesn't sell fights with his mouth, but like he keeps on finding himself in these prestigious positions within the company. So I get the feelings of these other fighters, but I think for me the other thing is the fact that it really does prove that Alex Pereira is the number one guy in the promotion, because everybody wants to crack at him.
I mean, I read a comment, I think it was on YouTube, when someone says they didn't expect that the biggest gift that Israel Adesanya gave to the game was Alex Pereira. Because of their history, Alex Pereira has come up, got a title shot, beats Izzy, goes to lightweight and all that stuff. The other thing with him, Jay, is that whenever there's an injury, or my lightweight, or my heavyweight, he's always saying, I'll save the day. That's a dream for the boss. That's a dream for the boss in terms of who's the big name, who's going to save us, who's going to save the card. Alex Pereira is always willing. He would have been on 310 as well, except Dana's like, nah, not this time, my man. Take a break, you know. So I think he is a darling. He's the biggest star of the UFC, and I think
he's always willing to fight.
He knows that time's not on his side, and he's going to make hay while the sun shines. So he is a big star. But Jay, talking about big stars, right? Same said Jon Jones said that if he is to go into the octagon against Tom Aspinall, he needs to get that FU money. And you know who's got the FU money, Jay? Turki Alalshikh. Turki Alalshikh said that if possible, right, he wants to make a dream boxing bout or a dream MMA fight, and he says if possible he wants to see Jon Jones go against Francis Ngannou. Do you think with Turki Alalshikh having that FU money, do you think we're closer to seeing that dream fight happen?
Turki Alalshikh throwing his name into the hat means, Chuck, it is inevitable. Yeah. I cannot see how it doesn't happen, because prize fighters fight for that prize, and the prize that the man who heads up Riyadh season is going to throw at these fighters is going to be such that it is impossible to ignore. And on the side of Jones, who's still affiliated, of course, to UFC and Dana White, he's going to go speak, and they have a great relationship. This is Jones and Dana White. So as much as Dana White has his issues with other promotions, Turki Alalshikh is not necessarily a promotion as such, right? But he's got the thing that gets all of these guys to talk. He's got money. Money makes this world in particular go around. And you go to Dana White and you put up a number which he cannot ignore, because every man has his price. This fight is going to happen. You know, we were looking at Dana White as, is he going to be able to make this fight happen, considering his history with Ngannou and where Ngannou is presently fighting from. And we cast doubts over it, right? But it feels as if, Chuck, this is too big of a fight for it not to happen. In pugilistic sports, particularly in boxing, we've had this issue in terms of the fights that we want to see, they don't happen. But in actual truth, Chuck, they might not happen at the time that we want them to happen. They might not happen at the peak of the two bulls' careers, but they tend to happen eventually, right? Most famously, Mayweather and Pacquiao, we clamored for that fight for the longest of times. it didn't happen, but it did happen. The trajectory is such that you cannot have two guys who are this level of star power in the same generation, and it doesn't happen. And yeah, maybe when we see it, we might be disappointed. That's what happened in that fight with Mayweather and Pacquiao. That's what happened when Bud Spencer fought Bud Spencer. Bud Crawford fought Errol Spence. Bud Spencer's somebody totally different. And it's also the heavyweight fights that we've gotten to see. The reason we haven't seen, for example, a Joshua go up against Wilder is because of what has happened in their careers. There isn't that much of a desire to see that. If somehow they were able to repatch their careers, we will see that, and it's going to happen in Saudi Arabia. So with Jones and Ngannou, considering that this is the one fight above all that all fight fans, UFC fans, MMA fans want to see. And if that guy who holds so much money and so much power and so much sway says that this is something that he's dreaming about make happen, he's gonna make it happen. It's gonna happen.
I mean, these are fights that we have to see, Jay, and I think with Turki Alalshikh having saved boxing, if I could say that, because he's put together the fights like the Bivol and Proteas. It's because he was central to that coming together. When you see Fury and Usyk, it's because he was there, putting his hand, making sure that these fights come together. And so, I mean, MMA world right now, I mean, Pantoja at UFC 310 called out Mighty Mouse. It's like, I know you're retired, but come on, let's go for the legacy. Mighty Mouse said he was once offered $2 million for a fight, and he says no, because it's good. But what if Turkey turns it up and says, I can give you 10? That we might see that legend fight Pantoja. We might see Ngannou fight Jon Jones, another legend. So I think he's the guy. He's the middleman to broker all deals, because you see guys like Eddie Hearn who are in charge of their own boxing promotions. But when Turkey speaks, they listen as well. So I think we're closer to seeing it, because the thing about UFC contracts as well, and I don't know how they work exactly, but Dana White is on the record having said, I can't force guys to fight. You got a 5-fight deal, but if he says he's not ready to fight in June, I'm not going to force him. I'll find someone else. And I'll use this guy who's willing to fight. And so sometimes I'm of the impression that if guys don't want to fight or they want to walk away with the UFC, it's not that difficult to do that. And so I think if Jon Jones like, hey, there's more money over there, and for my legacy I can fight Ngannou as well, I think it shouldn't be difficult. But if he wants to benefit as a promotion as well, make the deal with Turkey. Make the deal.
I really hate the dependence we have on Saudi Arabia because of everything that is Saudi Arabia. But man, we cannot deny that they are injecting life and through the resources at their disposal into sports. It's not just fighting, right? Formula One as well. They're involved over there. And yeah, Chuck, we might see a FIFA Football World Cup happening over there as well. So yeah, I think fight fans in particular are willing to overlook all of that because, as I said, as we've said, like that's the one fight we want to see. And do you think it's going to happen? And when it does, best believe we will be talking about it. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Two Upfront. Please continue to subscribe, to comment, to like, to share our content on YouTube. It is Two Upfront. You can continue to listen to the audio podcast. It is Two Upfront both on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And if you do want to engage with us beyond the comments, even though we do invite you to talk to us in the comments, you can do so on our social media pages. On all social media pages, we are at Two Upfront Pod. I am at J_Mzulu. Chuck is at Chuck. Two Up from Jay. I'm out.
With all good that happened in sports, with Chelsea winning, with City dropping points, I think that's good. And from my perspective, the thing that matters most is that Proteas are one win away from the Chess Championship, and we get to play in the final. Let's look out for that. This is Chuck, and I'm out.